I didn't expect the chaos to start the moment I stepped through the door. It wasn't a grand entrance. No loud sirens or dramatic confrontations. Just the soft hum of our fridge and the faint scent of David's cologne in the air. It felt like any other evening, until I saw her, Martha, my mother-in-law, sitting in the middle of our living room, unpacking a suitcase, as if it were completely normal, as if it had been planned for weeks. My stomach dropped. I blinked. The words didn't make sense at first. "She's living here now," David said, sitting on the couch, casually flipping through a magazine. "If you don't like it, you can leave." I stared at him, trying to understand. Was he serious? Martha didn't say a word. She just glanced up, her lips curling into a thin smile, as though this was all part of some game I hadn't been invited to. I swallowed hard, feeling the blood rush to my face. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. David barely looked up from his magazine. "She needs a place to stay. You know how it is. Family. Family." I wanted to scream. I wanted to march out the door and leave everything behind. But I couldn't. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a vice, and my throat tightened. I wasn't just facing an inconvenient situation. I was facing a decision that would change everything. I walked into the kitchen, pretending to gather my thoughts, but it didn't help. Martha was still here. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes. This wasn't just about the unexpected intrusion. It was about control, about power, about David's inability to say no to his mother. A flashback hit me suddenly. David's constant need to keep things calm, in front of his mother, the way he'd always shielded her, protected her, even when I felt she didn't deserve it. I had always known it was an issue, but now it was in my face, and I couldn't look away. I stepped back into the living room, where Martha had now settled into my favorite armchair, as though she belonged there. I wanted to scream again, but I swallowed it down. "I'm going to bed," I said, my voice quiet, but the tension in the room was palpable. David didn't respond. Neither did Martha. The next morning, I woke to find that Martha's things were everywhere. It wasn't just a suitcase anymore. There were boxes in the hallway, clothes draped over the couch, and the smell of coffee wafting through the apartment. My apartment. I was standing in the kitchen, trying to make sense of the morning, when I heard her voice. "Do you like my little setup?" Martha called from the living room. I froze. The walls were closing in. The door, that once felt like my refuge, now felt like a prison. This was just the beginning, I realized. I needed answers. It didn't take long for me to notice something was off. It wasn't just the fact that Martha was invading my home. It was the subtle shifts. The way David was acting, too calm, too detached. It was like I wasn't even a part of this equation anymore. "She's just here, temporarily," David had said last night. "We'll figure it out." But as I stood in our living room, staring at Martha, a nagging feeling crept in. What if this was more than a temporary stay? What if I was looking at the first step in a much larger plan? I was in the bathroom when my phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. It read, "I know what you're doing. Stop now." My heart skipped. The words felt like a punch to the gut. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Who could it be? Who knew about what was happening in my own home? I quickly erased the message, but the nagging suspicion wouldn't leave. I turned to look in the mirror, but all I saw was the same woman I had been before this mess started. I didn't recognize her anymore. I couldn't stop shaking. The day dragged on, with Martha seamlessly fitting herself into every corner of my life. Her presence was like a shadow, always just behind me. The next few days blurred together. I couldn't remember when I last had a peaceful moment. Every interaction with David seemed strained. Every time I walked into the room, I felt eyes on me. Martha's calculating gaze, always following, always waiting. I had to figure out what was really going on. Later that night, I sat across from David in the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I needed answers. Why didn't you tell me your mother was moving in? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The calmness in my tone felt wrong, but it was the only thing keeping me from losing it. David didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath and set down his glass of wine. I didn't think it was necessary to make a big deal out of it. You're making this worse than it is. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This is a big deal, David. I don't know if you understand that. He leaned back, his face unreadable. She's not going anywhere, Rachel. You'll have to get used to it. I stared at him, the silence thick between us. I could feel the tension in my chest. I wanted to leave, wanted to run, but I was trapped. I had no choice but to stay and figure this out. The truth was slipping further from my grasp with every passing minute. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that I was going to have to make a choice that could change everything. The only question was, could I survive the truth once I found it? The air in the apartment felt heavy, like I was suffocating without even knowing it. Every room seemed to echo with a sense of unease. Martha was still here, and it wasn't just the physical clutter in our space that bothered me. It was the way she had wormed her way into our lives. I could feel it creeping into every corner, into the cracks where our lives used to be simple. I barely slept last night. My mind replayed the argument with David, his eyes cold as he told me I had no choice but to accept his mother's presence. Every word from him felt like a stab to my gut, each one pushing me further into a reality I didn't want to face. Was I really supposed to just lie down and let her take over our lives like this? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Martha was in the kitchen this morning, moving about as if she owned the place. The sound of her humming as she made coffee grated against my nerves. I couldn't just let it go, but the knot in my stomach tightened every time I thought about confronting her. I hadn't asked for this. None of this was supposed to be my problem. David came in from the bedroom, still groggy, not even acknowledging me. He sat at the kitchen table and grabbed the paper like everything was normal. It was like he had completely forgotten the storm that was brewing between us. I stood by the counter, watching him, trying to keep my thoughts straight. But it was hard. Too hard. You really think this is okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You think I'm just going to sit here and pretend like everything's fine while she takes over? David didn't look up. He kept flipping through the paper, his face impassive. She's family, Rachel. She's struggling and she needs us. Just deal with it. Deal with it. I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. You're telling me to just accept it? Accept that your mother has moved into our home without so much as a discussion. He finally looked up at me, his eyes cold. You knew what you were getting into when we got married. Family comes first. I could feel my blood boil. But this is too much. David just sighed and stood up. You'll get used to it. I was about to argue again when Martha entered the kitchen, her smile wide as she placed a cup of coffee in front of me. It's the least I can do, dear, she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. I wanted to throw the cup in her face, but I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and walked out, not sparing either of them another glance. The day dragged on, but my thoughts never stopped. I couldn't just ignore it. I needed to know what was going on, what David wasn't telling me. I'd seen the signs before, the weird silence when I asked questions about his past, the way he avoided certain topics when it came to Martha. But now it all seemed to be falling into place. My husband, the man I trusted, had been hiding something, and I couldn't let it slide anymore. After pretending to work for a few hours, I decided to go through David's desk. It wasn't something I normally did, but this wasn't normal. There had to be something hidden in there, something that would explain the sudden shift in our lives. I moved quickly, trying not to make a sound. David was still in the living room, watching TV. His back was turned. I pulled open the drawer, and my fingers froze as I scanned the contents. Bills, a few receipts, nothing out of the ordinary. But then something caught my eye, a contract. I pulled it out, scanning it quickly. It was from a company I didn't recognize, a company that was tied to the investments David had made before we got married. My heart began to race as I read through it. This was not just a financial agreement. The contract was signed by David and Martha. And it wasn't just any business deal. It was linked to something larger. Money was being moved, funds transferred in and out of accounts. And there was something else, something hidden in the fine print. I was shaking now. This wasn't just about David helping his mother. This was about dirty money, about something much bigger than what I could have ever imagined. I tucked the contract back into the drawer quickly and backed away from the desk. What was he involved in? And why was he hiding it from me? The tension was suffocating as I sat in the living room, staring at the door. I could hear David talking to Martha, the two of them laughing as if everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. I had to confront him. I couldn't let him keep me in the dark. When David walked in, I didn't waste any time. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the contract. My voice was cold, but there was a tremor in it I couldn't hide. David's face paled, and for a moment I saw a flash of something. Fear. "What is this?" I repeated, my voice low. David hesitated, his eyes flickering. "It's just an investment, Rachel. It's nothing." "It's not nothing," I interrupted. "You and your mother are involved in something illegal. I need to know what this is about." David stood there, his fists clenched, his face hardening. "You don't understand," he muttered. "Then explain it to me." I shot back. "What the hell have you been hiding?" David took a deep breath, his expression shifting. "You don't want to know, Rachel." My pulse quickened. "Try me." But before he could respond, I heard a sound, a buzz from my phone. I glanced down at it and my stomach sank. It was a message from an unknown number. The text read, "You're getting too close. Stop asking questions, or else." I looked up at David, the blood draining from my face. He had no idea what I had just read, but the fear in his eyes told me I had just uncovered something far worse than I had imagined. Cliffhanger. And then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a neighbor, and it wasn't just a package. It was the sound of a ticking clock. The first warning. I couldn't breathe. Every inch of the apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating me. The weight of Martha's presence, her quiet yet relentless control, gnawed at me. I needed to escape, but there was nowhere to run. The more I tried to piece together the truth, the more I realized I was standing on the edge of something far darker than I could have imagined. David was different now. His attitude had shifted, his eyes no longer warm but distant. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was slipping away, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. I tried to tell myself that it was just the stress of his mother's unexpected move. But deep down I knew better. I had seen this kind of change before, when someone was hiding something. I sat in the living room, staring at the cold emptiness of the space, when I heard the faint sound of keys jingling in the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. The door opened, and there she was again, Martha, smiling as she stepped inside. The smile was a little too wide, the kind that seemed forced, as if she was trying to maintain control over a situation that was slipping through her fingers. "Good morning, dear," she said, almost too cheerfully as if nothing had changed. I didn't respond. I just nodded, my mind racing. My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. David appeared, his face impassive as always. He glanced over at Martha. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. I froze. This was it, the confrontation I had been dreading. David and I stood in the small hallway, away from Martha, but even the distance between us felt too close. He was acting like everything was fine, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand shook when he picked up a glass of water. He was hiding something. I could feel it. "I know you're upset," he said, his voice almost apologetic, but there was an edge to it. "But she's family. She needs us right now. You have to understand that." "Understand?" I repeated, my voice trembling. You're telling me to understand that she's living here without any warning? You didn't even consult me. This is a betrayal, David. David's face hardened, the warmth fading from his eyes. She's my mother, Rachel. You knew what you were getting into. I was already shaking with frustration, but something in his tone made me pause. I stared at him, searching for something, anything, that would explain why he was so indifferent. This wasn't just about his mother. This was about us. This was about how little he valued me. I took a step back, trying to steady myself. What aren't you telling me, David? For a moment, it felt like time stopped. His eyes darted to the door, as if he was afraid someone might be listening. It's not that simple, he whispered. You don't understand what's at stake. I was about to ask him what that meant when I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to find Martha standing there, watching us with an unreadable expression. I think it's time you understood, Rachel, she said, her voice soft but sharp, like a knife hidden in velvet. I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest. What do you mean? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Martha stepped forward, her smile twisting into something more sinister. There are things about this family you don't know. Things that could destroy everything you think you understand about us. Before I could respond, she held up a piece of paper, an official document, sealed and signed. This, Martha continued, her voice low, is the beginning of something much bigger than either of you realize. I took a step toward her, my pulse racing. What was she talking about? My fingers itched to grab the paper from her, but the way she held it, with a sense of finality, stopped me. You think this is just about your mother staying here, don't you? Martha's tone was laced with something I couldn't quite place. You think that's the problem, but it's much deeper than that. David was silent, watching the exchange, his face unreadable. The air between us thickened, and I could feel the weight of the secret hanging there, like a storm cloud on the horizon. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice shaking. Martha smirked, her eyes glittering with a cold, calculating gleam. You want to know what I've been hiding, Rachel. You want to know the truth. She took a breath, her smile widening. David and we've been running a business together for years. And it's not what you think. My stomach dropped. A business. I whispered, but the word felt foreign in my mouth. David's silence spoke volumes. Martha stepped closer, her voice now a whisper. Money, Rachel. Dirty money. We've been laundering it for years. All these investments you thought were for your future. It was never about us. It was always about the game. She glanced over her shoulder at David, then back at me. And now you're in the game, too. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen. This couldn't be happening. My mind couldn't process the words she was saying. David was involved in something illegal, something dangerous, and I was tangled up in it. Why? I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Martha's smile softened, but it was the kind of softness that made me shiver. Because, Rachel, we needed someone like you. Someone who would believe in us, trust us. And now we need you to stay quiet. For everyone's sake. The silence stretched between us, and for the first time, I realized how deep the betrayal ran. It wasn't just David anymore. It was both of them working together, and I had no idea how far this went. I was trapped. I had no choice but to play their game or risk losing everything. Cliffhanger. Just as I thought I understood the game, Martha stepped closer and whispered, This is just the beginning, Rachel. If you think you're out, think again. The real danger is coming. The sound of the doorbell ringing shattered the fragile calm I had been desperately clinging to. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't just a normal visitor, it was a warning. The same feeling I got when something dark and dangerous was lurking just out of sight. I stood there for a long moment, my mind racing. The message, the contract, Martha's cryptic words, everything was spiraling out of control faster than I could process. I needed to know more. I had to find the truth. David had been avoiding me all day, retreating into himself as if the walls were closing in on him. But I wasn't going to let him off the hook. Not anymore. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door, my steps deliberate. I couldn't afford to hesitate. Not with the stakes so high. The moment I opened it, I saw him standing there. Nolan, David's old business partner, the one person I never expected to be involved. He was the last person I wanted to see, and yet there he was. "Rachel, I need to talk to you," Nolan said, his voice low and steady. His eyes flickered nervously over my shoulder, and I could feel the tension hanging between us. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside, letting him into the apartment. My heart thudded in my chest. I knew this meeting wasn't by chance. I had no idea what he wanted, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't good. "Where's David?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Out," Nolan replied quickly, avoiding my gaze. "Look, Rachel, I'm not here to cause trouble, but you need to understand what's going on. This," he gestured around the room, "this is bigger than you think." I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean?" Nolan hesitated. He shifted his weight, glancing at the door, as if expecting someone to walk in at any moment. "David and we've been working together for years. He didn't just get involved with Martha because of family. It was always about the money. The business, it's all connected to something much darker than you realize." I felt a chill run down my spine. Something darker? I had no idea what Nolan was trying to say, but I knew I wasn't prepared for it. "Explain," I demanded, my voice harder than I intended. Nolan looked around, then leaned in closer. "The business David and Martha are running isn't just illegal, Rachel. It's connected to something dangerous. They've been laundering money for a criminal organization for years. And now they're using you. You're their next step." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean, using me?" He took a deep breath, as if struggling to find the right words. "You don't understand. David got in too deep. The money, the power, they wanted him, but they needed you to make it all seem legitimate. You're their perfect cover, Rachel. The law, the family image, it's all a front." My head spun. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed about David, about us, was a lie. He hadn't just lied about the money. He had lied about everything. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice breaking. Nolan hesitated, his face drawn. "Because I don't want to see you get hurt, Rachel. David, he's not the man you think he is. I don't know if he even knows how deep this goes anymore." The air felt suffocating. I staggered backward, trying to process the whirlwind of revelations. "So what? You're just going to walk away from this? You're telling me all of this now, but you've been part of it too, Nolan." He flinched at my words. "I didn't have a choice. You don't know what they've done to people who try to get out. You don't want to get involved any further. You think you can walk away from this, but once you're in, you can't get out. They'll come for you." My pulse quickened. "They'll come for me?" The gravity of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. Before I could say anything more, I heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The door to the apartment swung open, and there stood David, his face pale, his eyes cold. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Nolan stiffened, his gaze shifting to me, then back to David. "I was just telling her the truth," Nolan said, his tone much firmer than before. "She has the right to know." David's expression hardened. "Stay out of this, Nolan." The tension between the two men was palpable. I could feel it like electricity in the air, as if the very room was charged with some unseen force. I was trapped between them. Nolan didn't move, but his voice was quieter now, as if warning me. "Don't say I didn't try to help, Rachel." And with that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, stunned, with David's icy stare burning into me. I didn't speak for a long moment. David didn't either. The silence was deafening, and yet the words I needed to say felt like they were stuck in my throat. David stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You should have stayed out of it," he muttered, not looking at me. This was never your fight. I blinked, my chest tightening. What did Nolan mean? What did he mean by "you're using me"? David's eyes finally met mine. For the first time I saw something darker, something real in his gaze. But before he could say anything, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up without thinking, my hand trembling. The message was simple. A name, an address, and a time. It was an invitation. Or a threat. I couldn't tell anymore. David's voice broke through my shock. "Don't go, Rachel." I looked up at him, the fear in my chest choking me. "What's going on, David? What have you done?" His answer was a whisper. "It's too late to back out now." Cliffhanger. As I stared at the address on my phone, my heart skipped a beat. The name at the bottom of the message was one I never expected to see again, and now I had no choice but to face it. I couldn't breathe. The message on my phone had been enough to shatter whatever illusions I had left about my marriage. David and Martha had their own world, and I was just a pawn, an unwilling pawn in a game I never wanted to play. But I didn't have a choice now. The invitation, or perhaps a threat, had been clear, and if I didn't go, I knew they would come for me. I stuffed my phone back into my pocket and glanced over at David. He was sitting on the couch, his eyes focused on something that wasn't there. The silence between us was suffocating. I had learned long ago that silence was the loudest kind of communication in this house. It screamed truths we weren't willing to admit. "You're not going," David said without looking at me. His voice was low, almost as if he had been expecting me to leave. I didn't answer him immediately. I couldn't. Every part of me wanted to scream, to demand he explain himself, to finally make him see the lies that had built the walls between us. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of fear, that stopped me. I wasn't sure if it was fear for me or for himself. But either way, it told me more than any words could. "I don't have a choice anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. David didn't reply. He didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. I stood up, feeling the weight of every decision I'd made up to this point. The air was thick with tension, but the time for questions had passed. I had to go. I had to face whatever truth this game was about to reveal. The streets outside felt colder than usual as I drove through the darkened city, the headlights slicing through the night. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Nolan's words echoed in my head, along with the unsettling image of Martha's smile. So sweet, so calculating. I had a feeling that tonight wasn't going to be anything like I expected. The address on my phone led me to an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place you drive past and never give a second thought. But tonight it felt like it was alive, like it had been waiting for me. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, each step heavier than the last. The sound of my shoes clicking on the pavement felt deafening in the silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I reached the entrance, a rusted steel door that barely hung on its hinges. The sign above it read, "Property of GAT Enterprises." I'd never heard of it before, but something about the name struck me as wrong. My hand hovered over the door handle for a moment, and in that instant I realized that everything I had ever known was about to change. I pushed the door open. The inside of the building was dim, the air thick with the scent of mildew and dust. The faint sound of voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. I hesitated, but only for a second. The time for hesitation had passed. I moved forward, my footsteps tentative, until I reached the end of the hall. A large door stood before me. The voices were louder now, a mix of deep, gravelly tones and sharp, clipped words. I wasn't alone. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, I saw them, David and Martha, standing side by side with a few strangers I didn't recognize. The room smelled of leather and something metallic, like the kind of scent you get after a storm has passed. David looked up at me, his eyes empty. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice cold, distant. I didn't respond. My eyes scanned the room. taking in every detail. There were papers everywhere, documents I couldn't understand, but I didn't need to. The one thing that stood out was a large briefcase sitting on the table in the center of the room. It was locked, but it was clear that it held the key to everything. Martha stepped forward, her smile still in place. I told you, Rachel. This isn't just about family. It's about survival. I took a step back, my mind racing. What do you want from me? I whispered, barely able to get the words out. The man who had been standing in the shadows stepped forward. His face was obscured by the low light, but there was something intimidating about him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a suit that seemed far too clean for a place like this. You're the last piece, he said, his voice gruff. We need you, Rachel. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, but I already knew the answer. They were going to use me. Martha's voice cut through the tension, smooth and calculating. David and I have worked hard to get where we are. We've made a lot of sacrifices, and now it's your turn to help us finish what we started. I shook my head, my mind spiraling. Sacrifices? What had they really been doing all this time? How deep had they gone? Before I could speak again, the man in the suit stepped forward, his hand resting on the briefcase. This isn't a game anymore. It's bigger than you think. His words landed like a slap in the face. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. The money, the lies, the manipulation, it was all part of something much darker, and I was in the center of it. I turned to David, my voice barely a whisper. How could you do this? He didn't answer. His eyes remained cold, as if he were already too far gone to save. I felt the walls close in. I couldn't trust anyone here. Not David, not Martha, and definitely not the man in the suit. I stepped back, the room spinning around me. What is this really about? I demanded, my heart pounding. The man in the suit looked at me, his expression unreadable. The game is over, Rachel, he said, his voice a quiet threat. You don't get to walk away anymore. The words hit me like a sucker punch, and just like that I realized there was no way out. Cliffhanger. As I took one last look at the man in the suit, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the nightmare I never thought I'd be part of. I wasn't sure when it all went wrong, but as I stood in the dimly lit room, staring down at the briefcase in front of me, the reality of it settled in. The weight of the choice, the decisions I'd made, hung over me like a noose. This was it, the end of the road. There was no turning back now. David's face was pale, his eyes hollow. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. He had crossed a line, and he knew it. His mother, Martha, had orchestrated everything. But David had chosen this path long before I'd walked into their lives. The illusion of the man I thought I knew was shattered. What now, Rachel? David's voice was low, filled with a strange mix of anger and resignation. Are you really going to turn your back on all of us? I shook my head. The question was too much. It wasn't about turning my back. It was about surviving. There was no us anymore. It had been him and his mother from the start. I was just collateral damage. I glanced over at the briefcase again. My heart pounded. I knew what was inside. I'd seen the documents, the accounts, the names, the connections. This wasn't just about a few bad investments or laundering dirty money. This was about entire networks, about a web of lies and corruption that spanned far beyond what I'd ever imagined. And I was caught right in the middle of it. Martha stepped forward, her smile still that cold, calculating smile that I hated. I told you, Rachel, she said, her voice smooth. You don't get to walk away. We need you to make this all work. You have no idea what's at stake. I clenched my fists. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't. I couldn't. My thoughts raced too fast. You've been lying to me, I said, finally finding my voice. Lying about everything. All these years, you've manipulated me, played me like a fool. Martha's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. It wasn't just about you, Rachel. It's bigger than that. You were always part of the plan. This was never about trust. It was about control. Control. I repeated, my voice cracking. I was just a pawn to you. A way to keep the walls up. To make everything seem legitimate. David didn't say anything. His gaze dropped to the floor. It was clear now. He had known all along what was going on. He had chosen this path, even if it meant losing everything that truly mattered. But then, something inside me snapped. You don't get to destroy me like this, David. You've made your choice, but I'm not going down with you. My voice was sharp, steady. I was done being the victim. Suddenly, the door burst open. The man in the suit, the one from the building, stood in the doorway, flanked by two others. His eyes scanned the room before settling on me. There was no warmth, no compassion, just cold calculation. You think you can just walk away from this? He asked, his voice deep and menacing. You're in it now, Rachel. You're too far gone to turn back. There's no saving you. I turned to David, desperation creeping into my voice. You have to stop this. You don't want to be part of this anymore. There's still time to fix this. But David didn't move. He didn't speak. The man in the suit stepped closer, his hand resting on the briefcase. We all have our roles to play. Yours is to stay quiet and let things play out. You don't get to decide what happens anymore. I felt the world shift beneath me, a sudden dizziness washing over me. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about something far more dangerous, and I had no idea how to escape it. But then I saw it, the edge, the breaking point, a small detail that David had overlooked, something I had missed in the chaos, a small crack in his carefully constructed world. I reached into my bag, feeling my fingers wrap around the device I'd hidden earlier, a small recorder. I hadn't been idle these past few days. I'd been collecting pieces, just in case. I pressed the button, and the room was filled with the sound of a ticking clock. The recorder captured the conversation, the admissions, the threats, the manipulation. It wasn't just evidence, it was my escape plan. You won't get away with this, I said, my voice now sharp, filled with the strength I had found within myself. I have everything I need. You've lost control. The man in the suit stepped forward, but I was ready. You're too late, I said. The game is over. David's eyes flickered, confusion crossing his face. For a moment, I saw a flicker of regret. But it was too late for regret. Before anyone could react, I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding. Every step was deliberate, but my mind was already racing toward what came next. There was no turning back now. Hours later, I sat in my car, the city lights blinking in the distance. The recorder was in my hand, the truth finally within reach. My mind raced with everything I had learned, everything I had uncovered. The deception, the lies, the betrayals, it was all out there now. The pieces had fallen into place, and the truth would bring them down. I looked at the message on my phone, an unknown number. A familiar voice came through the speaker, the same voice I had heard all too often in my head over the past few days. You did it, Nolan said. You're out. But I wasn't sure anymore. Out? Or just at the beginning of something else. The car roared to life, and as I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. What had I learned? That some battles weren't won in a single moment. They were fought in the quiet spaces in between, in the moments when you found your voice and refused to be silenced. I thought about the life I had been living before all of this, and I realized I wasn't just escaping something. I was choosing to live my life on my own terms. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about choosing yourself. Even when the world seemed like it was crumbling around you, the one thing you could control was your own path. And as I drove into the night, I knew that no matter what came next, I would face it, because I was done being anyone's pawn. Cliffhanger. But as the city lights blurred into the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't as free as I thought. Some ghosts never leave, and some battles never truly end.